Hey folks, Paul Tumey coming at you on a Sunday to talk about a book called Sunday by the great Olivier Schrauwen, published by Fantagraphics in mid-2025, let's say. This book is it's over 400 pages long, and it's a compilation of previously published comics. Each one was called Sunday, and there's part one right there. There are 7 parts in total, and each book was about that long and various page lengths. Cost you about $20 in the United States, if you could even find it. It was hard to find. I believe they were originally printed in risograph, which, you know, has that characteristic look. This is probably offset, though, I'm pretty sure. So the colors aren't quite as vibrant as they originally were, but the entire book is there. There's all 7 parts, and then there's a final part, which we'll talk about, we'll get to. This is one of the more fascinating books I've ever read. I spent about a week reading it slowly and absorbing it and thinking about it. And as Schrauwen points out in the beginning, it's about his cousin Thibaut Schrauwen, and Thibaut spoke conversationally with great displeasure about wasted days. So this is a book about wasted days. Quote, days filled with procrastination, aimlessness, and boredom. So given that, you'd think this would be a pretty damn boring book, but actually, you know, if you've read anything from Schrauwen, you know you're in for something special. He's a master of the medium. He has a lot to say, and he's funny as hell. This little instruction right here, I'll just show you how this thing works. It's pretty damn incredible. But first, I wanted to mention that the book has these fold-out covers, which is good because it gives you a little bit of extra reinforcement as you're reading this trade paper book. Since it's so thick, it kind of needs it. But what are these diagrams? What is this? I have to admit, I was completely mystified when I bought the book and I opened it and I studied these. I couldn't really tell what was going on. It seemed just to be random symbols. Obviously there's an eyeball, that's one of the symbols, and there's a T. But as you read the book, you begin to understand a lot more about what this is. But right now, let me just show you something, a pattern that I noticed. Starts with a T, and then it's going in columns. So the T slowly transforms into a human eye, and then it transforms back into a T, and the pattern starts all over again. Now, each one of these has resonance within the story that we're going to look at, and I don't know that I'll capture all of them, but this begins to make a lot more sense, and it's kind of fascinating. Now, one thing to start you out is Thibaut is a font designer. So T is the first letter of his first name, but he's also he's a professional font designer. Another thing, this documents his day, just one day in the life of. Now, there's another in literature from 120 or so years ago. There's another big thick book by a guy named James Joyce called Ulysses that also documents one day in the life of a person, and it's inside that person's mind. This is where we get the term stream of consciousness. This is where as far as I can tell, it was, it's the most famous example of that style of writing a person's thoughts and seeing the world through their mind. So that's what we have here. We have, first off, a chronicling of Thibault's life. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. It could be Tybalt or Thibault, but I'm saying Thibault. Anyway, I'm sure he's Belgian. So part 1 starts from 8:15 a.m. and goes to 10:15 a.m. And we go all the way to part 7. Let's see if I can quickly get that title page for you. Is this it? Yeah. To 10:45 p.m. And then there's an extra part called X, which is very different from the rest of the book, and it doesn't actually tell us the time span, because this gets more into traditional third-person omniscient narrative. But from 8:15 a.m. to 10:45 p.m. on this particular Sunday, we're following the thought processes of Thibault, which are mostly aimless, wandering around, and funny as hell. And I should say uncomfortably familiar. Begins in the darkness, and his first thought as he's waking up, oh sorry, I'm trying to get this in focus for you guys. Kind of a constant problem. Wow. First thing he does is grabs his phone. Another thing here is he's checking the time, and he says, always 8:15, I must be a robot. So one thing that I noticed, that was kind of strange about if you're chronicling somebody's life from or their thoughts from the time they wake up in the morning on one day to the time they fall asleep, it's not always going to be in 5-minute increments, right? It's not always going to be 8:15 and 10:45. Why not 8:17 and 10:52? But here we get an explanation why. Because Thibault, for all his the messiness and disorganization of his thoughts and his day, he does have structure in his life, and this kind of already explains why we're starting at 8:15. So anyway, he's in bed, and his thoughts are always at the top of the image. So these are his thoughts. He's fallen back asleep. He wakes up again. Now, one of the things that's so wonderful about this book is that Schrauwen is breaking up his thoughts with what an autonomous camera looks at and shows us. So this matches, right? Here's his thought, and here he is emerging from his bedroom. He's just wearing his underwear, a t-shirt, and a robe, and I guess socks. And we see what he's doing, right? We see what he sees. Here we see a letter. And but then, okay, he's beginning to get an earworm going. Oh yeah, he's talking about this letter is from his client, who's saying, hey, where's that, in a friendly way, where's the font? It's overdue. Anyway, he thinks of James Brown's song Sex Machine, and suddenly we get to see James Brown dancing while we're still in Thibault's mind. And it starts to get kind of, you begin to get these really funny juxtapositions. And I guess he's trying to motivate himself to do the font, even though it's Sunday. He decides to do the split. It doesn't work out too well. Classic humor comic where we have a character clowning on paper. Schrauwen, if you've read his earlier work, you know that he understands the history of comics and the earlier masters, and he's always riffing on them. So now the camera follows this cat while we're still in Thibault's thoughts. Okay, and this is just a taste of how it goes. And now we're actually going into the neighbor's apartment. The cat has looked in the window of the neighbor's apartment, and we see that the neighbor woman is preparing food for her husband to bring over to Thibault because his girlfriend is out of town. He doesn't really want her to do this, and he sees it as an intrusion. He's completely missing the niceness. Anyway, the husband goes out into the world, but Thibault's thoughts are still here. And sometimes there's no obvious connection, and then other times there's a very great payoff, a very funny connection. And notice how the camera is now, it's like floating up above the building and higher. He's still got the James Brown song playing. Get on it. Get up. Ah. It's almost like he's telling the camera to go up. Stay on the scene like a sex machine. And how here we're going into, I believe, the domicile of his friend Rick, who is sleeping with his lover. He's gay. And yeah, anyway, shake your moneymaker. There's his friend Rick. And Rick's going to send him a message saying, hey, I'm going to come by and visit you later. Thibault's just wanting a quiet day at home. And so he gets this message that says, as promised, I'm in town and planning to come. And this kind of alarms Thibault. And look what Schrauwen does with the art. Fuck no. You know that feeling when someone says they're going to come by, but you don't really want them to come by because you don't want to have to deal with anybody. You just want to stay in your own cocoon. And now he's imagining his friend, Rick, R-I-K. And then we're back to watching him. So it becomes this just incredibly rich narrative where it's jumping around and we're following characters that might cross over here, and it's also very I should say this is kind of like adult oriented, so not a comic for kids, but it is a realistic comic about a middle-aged man's life and the things you think of alone. And you get these really funny juxtapositions. Here's the neighbor sitting down to have a fresh baked good that he went out and got, and he's putting some jam on it, and the words say, that's so beautiful. And look what he's done with the coloring here. Now also, in addition to jumping around, here's another thing that happens. This is pretty funny. While Thibault is, shall we say, providing pleasure to himself at that moment, our neighbor who's eating the baked good is doing something, sort of the food equivalent of that. Well, I kind of have to jump past this. And yeah, anyway, it also jumps back in time. It starts jumping around in space. So here we are. Thibault's girlfriend is in a completely different country right now, and she's having her own adventure. And he's wondering, what's going on. He hasn't heard from her in a while. This actually made me laugh out loud so hard. He's trying to come up with a text to send her. And the panels get small and dense because he's having a fairly intense thought process. And he's trying to come up with, a text that'll sound right. It won't insult her, but it'll get from her the information about when she's planning to be back home, which he would like to know so he can be ready for her visit, because he's basically being really lazy and indulgent. He might want to pick up, he might not want to be chemically altered, or might want to be awake or whatever. So he's trying to find a surreptitious way to do that, and he's just coming up with crazy stuff like, you haven't caught a disease, have you? Now he's imagining sending text to his client. Now he's back to James Brown, because that's the way. I don't know if your mind does this, but I'll get songs that just loop and play, or parts of songs in my mind. Get up, get up on it. So he finally types his text. He finally composes one, which has typos, and this should say H-E-Y. It just says H-E here. And instead of saying babe or babes, he says babies. Missed you when you home. It's a pretty bad text, and for all this effort, he's really come up with something kind of dumb. And so I laughed when I read this. And then something amazing happens. It hangs in the air as the camera travels. It pulls out. It's still hanging in the air. There's the text. Goes through the sky. And it just keeps, this terrible text is going through the air like texts do. And it finds his girlfriend. Hasn't quite found her phone yet. And then there it is. Bip. That's the husband, says somebody she's with, getting impatient. And there's the text. And she says, he can wait a bit longer. But this, I laughed so hard during this, because it's such an inconsequential, dumb, poorly composed text. And, he was trying to be subtle about asking, but he finally just said, when you home? And she doesn't respond. And that's it. And so, our storyteller is finding the rhythm of story, even in an uneventful, seemingly aimless day, which I love. And then there's all kinds of other stories happening too, like the story of the cat and the mouse. There's other mice and other cats in here. There's other people, and it's their stories. It's the story of his past. The story gets richer and fuller and funnier as time goes on. So I won't go into the rest of it too much, but there is this play with the idea of tea that constantly is going on, and letters. And you can see something going on like we saw in the fold-out covers here. And it's just fascinating how his mind works. We also began to get a fairly well done recap, or involvement with, I should say. I think this movie is Angels and Demons, starring Tom Hanks. I think, or it might be the Da Vinci Code. It's one of the two. And Thibault doesn't think much of the movie, and he doesn't think much of Tom Hanks. It's really interesting to read his view of it. And it's really interesting because, Tom Hanks is supposedly in the movie a master of symbols, a symbologist, whatever that is. I'm not even sure if that's a real thing. But Thibaut is too, right? Because he works with fonts, and he sees fonts, he sees letters in shapes, in silhouettes, like the silhouette of a woman that he was in love with at an earlier part in his life appears to him to be an inn. And so he's a symbolist too, a master of symbols. But of course, that's what comics are. Comics are symbols. This is not a realistic portrait of a man. It's a symbol. But it works for us. And then, so the movie narrative continues. The quote camera is showing us the movie narrative, while we're also getting other narratives as well, such as what's going on with Thibaut's girlfriend, and her luggage. And it just gets super wild and super crazy. He's also gotten high, and so things start happening around this point where he's getting kind of sleepy and things are emerging. And so we're starting to get kind of a deconstruction of the story. We're at page 401. It's upside down up there. And page numbers go away after 405. This is the last numbered page. Oh no, 406 is the last numbered page. And then page numbers are all gone. And his consciousness becomes weirder and stranger. And I don't know if you guys experience this, but sometimes I actually fall asleep when I'm watching a movie. And, I may or may not be have partaken of a particular herb which is legal in the state of Washington. And things like this happen. The movie kind of integrates into what I'm dreaming or my consciousness. But it's done here so adroitly and so entertainingly and so humorous that this isn't a tired trope. This is a very vital, alive narrative to read. And yeah, here we go. He's drifting down into symbols. Everything breaks down into symbols. And that's the end of Thibaut of being in his mind. And there's one last part, which is not part 8, it's X. And this is third person omniscient. And this tells a wonderful, warm, much more multidimensional, much more layered, much more appealing part of the story. And I'll leave it for you to discover. So there you go. Those are a few thoughts on Sunday. Remarkable book. Thank you so much, Fantagraphics, for publishing it, and thank you so much for Olivier Schrauwen for giving us Sunday. I can't wait to read this again and savor it even more. Gave me a lot of good laughs, a lot of good thoughts. Thanks so much, man.